Now to that late afternoon notice from the Trump administration to revoke the legal status of potentially more than 500,000 immigrants currently living in the United States.
Last night, a federal judge in Maryland said the Trump administration is trying to obstruct the truth about the wrongful deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to El Salvador.
In 2025, immigration remains one of the most polarizing and defining issues of American politics. President Donald Trump, back in office for his second term, has made it clear that dismantling the Biden-era immigration framework is a top priority. But that path is turning out to be far more complicated than expected. At the heart of the latest legal standoff is a parole program launched during Joe Biden's presidency. It was designed to provide temporary relief for migrants from crisis-hit nations like Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. According to federal figures, over 530,000 people were admitted under this program. Now, the Trump administration wants to roll it back, arguing that the policy was built on shaky legal ground and has overstayed its welcome. But a federal judge disagrees. Earlier this week, a court blocked the administration's attempt to revoke legal status for these 500,000 immigrants. The ruling doesn't cancel the Trump administration's plan entirely. It just forces the government to review each case individually rather than revoke en masse. That process, legal analysts say, could take months, even years. Critics of the ruling argue that it's part of a broader trend, judges crossing the line from legal interpretation into policymaking. Supporters, however, believe the ruling is a necessary check on executive power. This is exactly what they want, to run out the clock, said one conservative commentator. They know that dragging this out will blunt the impact of any real change. Frustration is palpable on the right. Many feel the Trump administration is being stonewalled by a system that doesn't reflect the will of voters, who, in their view, chose a stricter immigration path at the ballot box. The president's allies argue that the 2024 election sent a message. Americans want firmer control over who enters the country. Donald Trump has framed the issue in stark terms. If you are breaking the law and you're here illegally, he said at a recent rally, you need to go back to where you came from. It's that simple. It's a return to the blunt messaging that defined Trump's first term. But this time, the legal and political terrain is more complex. The Biden-era parole program wasn't just a casual executive order. It was framed as a humanitarian response to conditions in failed or collapsing states, Haiti in particular, being cited as a country on the brink. And that raises a critical question. Are those countries still unsafe enough to justify allowing migrants to stay in the U.S.? The court seems to think that answer isn't clear-cut. While the Trump administration wants to argue that the original conditions no longer exist, legal experts say the burden is on them to prove it. Meanwhile, back in Washington, the political consequences are taking shape. In March 2025, Customs and Border Protection reported just over 7,000 apprehensions at the southern border. That's a stunning 95% drop from the same time last year, when apprehensions topped 137,000 in the first 2 days of the month alone. Trump's team is touting the numbers as early evidence that their crackdown is working. By day 100 of his presidency, they say, results are already visible. But Democrats aren't buying it. They point to the humanitarian impact and argue that Republicans are treating immigration like a political football, more concerned with optics than outcomes. The message is clear, one Democratic strategist said. This administration cares more about demonizing immigrants than solving the underlying issues. They're targeting vulnerable people to score political points. Yet public sentiment is hard to ignore. Many Americans feel overwhelmed by years of immigration crises, from caravans at the border to overloaded asylum systems. Polls show broad support for stricter enforcement, but also for a path to legal status for migrants already living and working in the U.S. That tension is mirrored in the courts, where every legal decision seems to raise more questions than it answers. In one high-profile case, the Supreme Court recently weighed in on the deportation of an undocumented immigrant accused of MS-13 gang ties. Now, the same court may be asked to step into the parole fight. Legal scholars say the issue is bigger than just immigration. It's about presidential power. If Biden used executive authority to create a program, can Trump use the same power to dismantle it? And if not, is the presidency effectively hamstrung? The case could set a precedent for how much any president, Republican or Democrat, can shape immigration policy through executive orders. For now, Trump is testing those limits, pushing hard against what he calls a legacy of open borders and amnesty by another name. Still, even among conservatives, there's concern that the current approach could backfire. Some fear that focusing too much on rolling back past policies without offering a clear alternative could alienate moderate voters. Others see the strategy as deliberate. The longer Trump can keep the immigration debate in the spotlight, the more he can use it to draw a contrast between his leadership and Biden's. It's a political script that's worked for him before. But unlike in 2016 or even 2020, today's political landscape is more fragmented. Social media backlash is immediate. Legal challenges come faster. And the immigration system is even more strained. One former DHS official described the situation bluntly. You have 500,000 people whose lives are now in limbo. Some are working, some have families, and now they're caught in a legal tug-of-war. Even among Trump supporters, there's a recognition that this won't be solved overnight. Still, inside the White House, the message remains consistent. Trump is taking action where others hesitated. And if that means taking on the courts, so be it. While the legal showdown over Biden's parole program unfolds in courtrooms, the human cost of the political battle is becoming impossible to ignore. For over 530,000 immigrants admitted under the now contested program, life in the United States has existed in a gray area. Never fully secure, but no longer in immediate danger of deportation. They came from countries in crisis. Many fled political instability, gang violence, economic collapse. Some arrived with children in their arms, others with only the hope of finding a stable life. Under the original plan, those admitted were allowed to live and work legally in the U.S. for up to 2 years. The program wasn't designed to be a permanent solution, but it became a lifeline for thousands. When Biden extended it shortly before leaving office, supporters praised the move as a humanitarian necessity. Critics, however, saw it as an abuse of executive authority, a last-minute decision meant to tie the hands of any successor. Now, with Trump back in power, that decision is under a microscope. His administration argues that the program was never legal to begin with, that it effectively bypassed Congress and gave blanket permission to hundreds of thousands without proper vetting. But opponents of the rollback say the administration is creating chaos. Without a permanent solution or clear legislative direction, hundreds of thousands of people are now left in limbo. Many of them have jobs, they pay taxes, some have started families, bought homes, or enrolled in schools. And with court battles now dragging the issue into a months-long or even years-long stalemate, their futures remain uncertain. Immigration attorneys across the country are reporting a surge in panic among their clients. Some are afraid to renew work permits, others fear visits from ICE. Employers, too, are caught in the middle. In several industries, agriculture, construction, home care, these workers fill vital roles. If their legal status is revoked, the ripple effects could be significant. This isn't just a legal issue, it's an economic one, said one immigration lawyer in Miami. We're talking about removing a massive number of working adults from the labor force during a time when we still have workforce gaps in key sectors. Even the business community has started weighing in. Chambers of commerce from several states sent letters to the White House warning that sudden mass revocations could destabilize local economies. Some states rely heavily on immigrants for seasonal labor, particularly in farming, hospitality, and elder care. But Trump's supporters remain unmoved. They argue that no matter how useful or integrated these immigrants have become, the law is the law. And for them, it's not just about economic balance sheets, it's about national integrity. We can't keep bending the rules, said one local official in Texas. We're a country built on laws. If we start picking and choosing which ones to follow based on feelings or politics, then the whole system breaks down. That's not how a functioning democracy is supposed to work. The immigration debate in 2025 is no longer just about policies on paper. It's about trust in the system. And for many Americans, that trust is wearing thin. President Trump's push to end the Biden-era parole program is just one part of a broader agenda. From the beginning of his second term, he's promised to restore order at the border, reinstate previous deportation protocols, and reassert control over immigration using every legal tool available. But the more he pushes, the more resistance he faces. not only in the courts but in public opinion too. For Republicans, immigration remains a rallying issue. Trump's base sees the battle as a matter of sovereignty and national identity. They argue that America must draw a firm line between legal and illegal entry, and that Biden's parole program blurred that line too much. The numbers, they say, speak for themselves. More than 500,000 people were admitted without congressional approval. To them, that's not compassionate. It's lawless. Yet the optics are complicated. Footage of families potentially facing deportation, stories of workers losing their jobs, or children growing up in fear of ICE raids don't play well across all demographics. Suburban voters, independents, and younger Americans tend to view the issue through a different lens. For many, immigration is a humanitarian concern. They see the parolees not as intruders, but as people seeking safety and opportunity. People who, in many cases, have now spent years contributing to U.S. communities. That disconnect is where the political divide widens. In Congress, efforts to pass a bipartisan immigration reform bill have stalled once again. Democrats want permanent protections for parolees and a pathway to citizenship. Some moderate Republicans are open to compromise, but face pressure from party hardliners who are aligned with Trump's strict enforcement stance. That leaves immigration in a state of paralysis, and while the legal process drags on, real lives hang in the balance. Consider the case of Carlos and Ana, a couple from Venezuela who fled political persecution in 2021. They were granted parole, found work in Texas, and now have a 2-year-old son born in the U.S. Carlos installs solar panels. Ana works in a nursing home. They've built a life. But now, with their legal status under review and no clear guidance from immigration officials, they live in daily uncertainty. Their employer doesn't know whether to keep them on the payroll. Their landlord is asking questions. And their son? He's too young to understand why his parents cry after opening government letters. Multiply their story by 500,000, and the scale of the crisis becomes clear. What's less clear is how it ends. Trump's team insists they're prepared to defend their position all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. They argue that Biden's program exceeded executive authority and that reversing it is essential to restoring lawful immigration practices. But critics say Trump's actions aren't just about legality. They're about politics. They see the crackdown as part of a broader strategy to galvanize his base heading into the 2026 midterms and maintain a hardline image in the media. It's working, at least in some corners. Conservative outlets have embraced the administration's moves as a long overdue course correction. Editorials praise Trump for restoring the rule of law and holding the line against unchecked migration. Right-wing pundits frame each legal win as a victory for American sovereignty. But on the ground, frustration is growing. Border states are especially strained. Local officials say they're caught in a tug-of-war between federal directives and community needs. Some sheriffs report confusion over how to handle parolees who are now in legal limbo. Should they be treated as legal residents? Should they be flagged for deportation? No one seems to have clear answers. Meanwhile, immigration courts are overwhelmed. Case backlogs stretch for years, and the new court order requiring the Trump administration to evaluate each parolee one by one has only added more pressure. Some judges handle as many as 50 cases a day. Immigration lawyers say it's unsustainable and unjust. There's no way to deliver fair rulings under this kind of workload, said one judge in California. We're human beings, not machines. The chaos has also fueled misinformation. Social media is flooded with conspiracy theories and rumors, often shared by users on both sides of the political spectrum. Some claim mass deportations are already underway. Others insist the government is secretly fast-tracking citizenship. None of it is accurate, but the confusion only deepens mistrust. In the middle of it all, many Americans feel powerless. They see leaders trading blame while the system deteriorates. They see real families caught in a cycle of legal threats and policy reversals. And they're asking, why can't anyone fix this? That question echoes across town halls, church meetings, and school parent nights. Immigration isn't just a national debate. It's a neighborhood issue. It shapes who your coworkers are, who your kids go to school with, who you sit next to at church. And for many, the debate no longer feels abstract. It feels personal. As Trump enters the second half of his first year back in office, immigration policy has become one of the most visible and divisive parts of his agenda. He has made it clear that he sees this as a fight worth having. His administration believes the public supports stronger borders, tighter rules, and decisive action. But whether those beliefs will hold through legal scrutiny, political blowback, and the test of public opinion remains to be seen. What is certain, though, is that the immigration question isn't going away. Not this year, not in 2026, and probably not for many years after that. Whether it's resolved by courts, rewritten by Congress, or reshaped by a future president, the story continues. And for the 530,000 immigrants in limbo and the millions watching around them, it's a story that gets more personal by the day. Immigration remains one of the most complex and emotionally charged issues in America. What began as a legal challenge to a temporary parole program has now grown into a national reckoning over executive power, humanitarian responsibility, and the very definition of law and order. As courts debate, lawmakers stall, and families wait in uncertainty, one thing is clear: the choices made in the months ahead will shape not just policies, but people's lives. What do you think? Should the program be ended or reformed? Are executive actions the right way to handle immigration, or is it time for Congress to finally act? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. We want to hear from you.